Hey students, let's do a quick overview of the powers of Congress. And first of all, you know that Congress has all those powers enumerated to them in Article 1, Section 8. So that list of powers, including all that stuff on the right, including stuff like building a post office and funding a military, declaring war, coining money, of course, interstate commerce, and the necessary and proper clause, also known as the elastic clause, are certainly really powerful powers of the federal government and powers of Congress. Here you have elastic lad and his stretchy ability to stretch that power further than they could ever imagine. Now, aside from these, we could certainly get into some specifics of the most important or prominent powers in the Congress. Remember, Congress can craft laws, and when we're looking at this list of powers here, we're thinking about what powers Congress can make laws about. So they can declare war, they can decide a new type of currency, they can decide how new people become citizens. Now, when we're talking about really important powers, I tend to think of most of these powers. I tend to think of first the power of the purse. And when you think purse, don't think like a handbag from today's world, but think of like a purse that might be stolen from someone. A bag of money is a purse. When I think purse, I think of like the little bags of coins that I see in like movies about Robin Hood and taking place in the, you know, 1100s. And I'm thinking of like, you have this little purse of coins, a little purse of money that you see in all these medieval kind of movies and television shows. That's a purse. And when you're thinking power of the purse, think of the fact that the federal government, they have a lot of money. They have a lot of taxation. They have a lot of spending. They have a lot of debt. And all of that is controlled by Congress. Congress decides how that money is spent. They decide taxation. They decide debt. So the federal government's Congress is able to do a lot with this. And when I'm thinking about like the presidency, I'm thinking about how hindered they are by the fact that Congress controls the money. So the president can want to do something, but maybe they can't because of that power of the purse not being in their hands. Now, of course, Congress also has the ability to make laws, and then they also have a power called franking. Now, franking sounds like a strange power, and it's kind of an individual power for individual congressmen. And franking is when a congressman is able to send mail to their home district or state for free. So congressmen are able to send basically, letters and newsletters and pamphlets and all this stuff as long as it has nothing to do with their campaigns to their home district or home state absolutely free. And this saves them potentially a lot of money. Because if you can imagine sending out a newsletter to 700,000 people in a district, that could be very costly when it comes to the post office expenses, when it comes to stamps. And here you have the ability of congressmen able to send out updates to their local district for completely free. And that's awesome for those congressmen because they're building up their name recognition. They're building up their incumbency factor so they can keep getting reelected. Maybe not awesome if you don't enjoy getting pamphlets in the mail or newsletters in the mail. Next thing, Congress has the ability of oversight. And oversight is probably one of the most important terms to remember and to think about. It's a power that is essential to know. This comes up a lot from the College Board. Oversight essentially means that the Congress oversees the executive branch, meaning they do investigations in the executive branch. They look at the expenses of the executive branch. They make sure nothing is going on in the executive branch that could be seen as corrupt. They check in when they think something's going wrong in the executive branch. When something goes wrong with an ambassadorship and an embassy, the Congress can investigate and look at what happened there. When a purchase goes wrong when it comes to a bureaucratic agency or department, that's something Congress can look into. So you often see hearings brought by committees that don't necessarily have to do with bills, but are investigations, allowing them to oversee the executive branch and then make changes if they need to. Certainly, Congress can make changes to their laws, and so if they see something's not working out, they can adjust that. So oversight is essential to know. You should kind of have some examples in your brain that they can have hearings and bring people in, they can investigate, they can use the GAO, the Government Accountability Office. All of those things are ways that they can have oversight over the executive. Now, lastly, of the really, really big powers that come up a lot, and by the way, these are all great powers that can check the executive at times, minus maybe franking. You have that the idea that the Senate has to approve appointments. So the Senate approves any appointments, and when I say appointment, I'm not talking about like a dental appointment or a doctor's appointment. I'm talking about appointments where someone's getting a position in bureaucracy, or someone's getting a position in the federal courts. So, for example, we just had an opening in the Supreme Court, and the president appointed Amy Coney Barrett to that opening. That means that the Senate had to basically have hearings and ask questions of Amy Coney Barrett, and then could decide to vote yes or no on that appointment. So they are providing the consent, the approval of that appointment. And that's a great example of Congress in action, performing their consent of appointments function. Now, appointments are consented only by the Senate, so the House of Representatives doesn't have a way to chime in on this. So it is important to realize that this is just the Senate having this appointment power. Now, they do have some powers when it comes to war. For example, of course, that they're in charge of funding the warfare, funding the supplies for warfare, and of course, Congress has the ability to declare war. Now, that doesn't mean that the president doesn't have other military actions that don't involve formal declarations of war, because this is going to be a major part of our executive branch topic. That today the president can send out troops for any number of different things, humanitarian efforts, helping out certain countries, as well as basically, attacking certain countries or attacking terrorist groups in a country or attacking individual terrorists. So declaring war doesn't necessarily always happen today in a world where a military action might not be declaring of war. Now, we just got done talking about how Senate approves appointments to the federal courts and to the bureaucracy, but they also get to approve treaties. So here we have Congress having a lot of say on foreign policy, an area where the president is really a big component of foreign policy, and here Congress can they can decide whether or not to go to war. They can limit and fund and not fund the armed forces. They could cut back on the armed forces if they wanted to. They could expand them. And they also are in charge of approving those treaties that the president gets basically brings back home. And interesting thing about the treaties, so the president could go off to another country, sign a treaty, bring it back to the Senate, and the Senate could reject it, which has happened numerous times in our history, where you've had a Senate reject a treaty that the president basically agreed to. And that's just part of our system that other countries have to realize when they're working out a treaty with us, that it's not just the president that signs off on these things. And by the way, that provides another check on the presidency. In fact, many of these things could be seen as checks on the presidency, minus maybe the franking. And of course, the ultimate check is impeachment and removal. And the impeachment process, essentially, impeachment means to bring charges against someone. So Congress has the ability to impeach a president, a member of the executive branch. They could impeach a court justice in the federal courts. And impeachment just means to bring charges. And according to the Constitution, it says you can bring charges for high crimes and misdemeanors. And that's kind of up to interpretation, because what is that? High crimes and misdemeanors? What makes something a high crime, and misdemeanors are pretty minor crimes. Uh, what constitutes an impeachable offense? And the Constitution doesn't say. We could certainly get into a nice discussion about what makes someone impeachable, and that's totally debatable. The framers, they kind of felt like impeachment would happen all the time, that there'd be something that the president would do, and they would potentially be able to be removed. That this was the ultimate fail-safe against any tyranny. If you had a president that was abusing their powers, you get rid of them and get a new one. And it hasn't been used that often. So we've seen plenty of people impeached in our history, justices and other folks, but presidents have only been impeached 3 times. The most recent impeachment, of course, happened with President Trump, and you can see the impeachment data on the screen. Impeachment, of course, is just bringing charges. So what happens is the House of Representatives, they vote on bringing charges. So they charge someone with, we're impeaching you. Then the Senate holds a trial, and the trial basically is a real trial. The House sends over people to act essentially as lawyers and bring forward witnesses and bring forward evidence and testimony, and then they vote on whether or not to convict that president or that federal judge. And conviction can include removal from that position of power. It can also mean that they can be barred from ever running for office or being in that position of office ever again. Now, no president has ever been removed, but certainly 3 presidents have been impeached in our history. So it's really important to just not confuse things. Impeachment does not equate removal. Someone can be impeached and then found, innocent. They can be acquitted. Okay, I'm going to stop the video here right now. Those are certainly the key powers to know. If you have questions about them, don't be afraid to ask. And I'll probably give you, if you're in class, we'll have a little activity on impeachment.